What if the most powerful antibiotic on the planet has never been synthesized in a lab, and your doctor has never once mentioned it? Most people believe pharmaceutical antibiotics are the apex of infection management. They fill the prescription, they trust the pill. They don't know that bacteria are evolving faster than the pharmaceutical industry can write new formulas, and the WHO calls antimicrobial resistance an existential threat. Here's what you were never told. Plants have been running a biological arms race against bacteria for over 500 million years. They didn't develop one weapon, they developed arsenals. Multi-vector chemical suites that disrupt quorum sensing, collapse efflux pumps, shred biofilms, and terminate bacterial replication from several molecular angles simultaneously. A synthetic antibiotic attacks down a single corridor. These plants seal every exit. Pay close attention to item 13, a fermented West African tree food that tribal healers used for centuries to make warriors immune to the plagues of the gut. The modern pharmaceutical gut industry has no equivalent. And by item 20, you'll understand why pyramid workers in ancient Egypt went on strike when this single plant was removed from their ration, and why the Red Army called it Russian penicillin during World War II. Stay to the end. What you learn there is what you're most likely to need, and least likely to have been given.
Item 1. Tormentil. Potentilla erecta. You've never heard of it. That's the problem. Tormentil's rhizome is up to 22% condensed tannins by dry weight. Monks deployed it in the 12th century against septic gut infections in crusaders returning from the Middle East. The name comes from the Latin tormentum, the agonizing abdominal pain it was designed to end. The active compound tormentoside precipitates proteins on contact with bacterial cell walls, physically blocking adhesion. It simultaneously inhibits hyaluronidase, the molecular crowbar pathogens use to dissolve the cellular matrix and spread through tissue. Block hyaluronidase, and invasive infections die at the perimeter. Metronidazole, the synthetic equivalent, will devastate your commensal microbiome and open the door to C. difficile. Tormentil doesn't. 15 grams dried rhizome, simmered in 500 milliliters water, reduced to half volume, 30 milliliters every 4 hours, acute phase.
Item 2. Cryptolepis. Cryptolepis sanguinolenta. If you needed to identify the single most potent systemic herbal antibiotic for resistant strains on this list, the peer-reviewed literature increasingly points here. Ashanti healers guarded the shrub's location as a national security asset. The primary molecule, cryptolepine, is a DNA intercalator. It inserts between bacterial base pairs, freezes the replication fork, and stops binary fission cold. Additionally, it penetrates and dismantles biofilms of MRSA and Borrelia by disabling MDR efflux pumps, the mechanism bacteria use to eject toxic agents before lethal accumulation occurs. Fluoroquinolones do the same thing synthetically. They also cause spontaneous tendon rupture, peripheral neuropathy, and mitochondrial dysfunction, a toxicity profile with its own medical term. Cryptolepis achieves the same inhibitory action without the systemic wreckage. 1 to 5 tincture in 60% ethanol, 2.5 to 5 milliliters, 3 times daily. No heat. Cold macerate for 12 hours minimum if alcohol is unavailable.
Item 3. Spanish needles. Biden's pilosa. You've walked past it. You dismissed it as a weed. That is exactly what it wants you to think. The Mayans and Incans called it the wandering healer. In traditional Chinese medicine, it treated purulent respiratory infections in rural populations with zero access to imperial pharmacies and consistently outperformed the expensive alternatives against sepsis. Its polyacetylenes induce lipid peroxidation in bacterial membranes, structural collapse, electrochemical failure, The second mechanism is more decisive. Ocanine glycosides jam quorum sensing, the chemical communication network bacteria use to coordinate synchronized toxin release and biofilm formation. Jam the signal before the cascade triggers, and a local infection never becomes systemic crisis. Vancomycin can't do that. It's also nephrotoxic. Biden's protects kidney function while it kills. 30 grams dried herb per liter, consumed throughout the day. For UTI or respiratory infection, juice fresh leaves immediately.
Item 4. King of Bitters, Andrographis panicillata. Its Ayurvedic title is Mahatikta. The bitterness is the mechanism.
During the 1918 influenza pandemic, the deadliest disease event in recorded history, it was the primary treatment in Indian regions where Western medicine had nothing. British Raj physicians with access to imported European drugs ultimately concluded the local king of bitters outperformed their own supplies for virulent tropical fevers and dysentery. The active compound andrographololide targets NF-kappa B, the master transcription factor governing the entire systemic inflammatory cascade. It suppresses cytokine storm, the runaway immune response that kills in severe sepsis and pneumonia, while simultaneously stimulating antibody production and macrophage phagocytic activity. Ibuprofen and prednisone suppress inflammation by suppressing immunity. Andrographis reduces inflammation while increasing the immune kill rate. It's also hepatoprotectic. Tetracyclines are hepatotoxic. The inversion is total. Protocol: 3 to 6 grams dried leaf powder daily, rolled in raw honey. Do not mask the bitterness early. T2R bitter receptors in the gut are part of the therapeutic mechanism.
Item 5. Sida, Sida acuta. A roadside weed, no common name most people would recognize. What it has is a chemical profile that makes it one of the most versatile broad-spectrum antibacterials in the survival pharmacopoeia. Its indoloquinoline alkaloids, cryptoline, quindoline, and related compounds collapse bacterial membrane permeability, destroying the electrochemical gradient that sustains cellular function. Active against S. aureus, E. coli, Pseudomonas aeruginosa, and Candida albicans in controlled laboratory settings. What makes Sida uniquely valuable is documented anti-biofilm activity. Biofilms render bacteria up to 1,000 times more resistant to conventional antibiotics. Sida's alkaloids disrupt quorum sensing before biofilm construction initiates. No signal, no biofilm. No biofilm, no fortress. Vancomycin and linezolid address some of these organisms at the cost of significant systemic toxicity. Sida's multi-alkaloid assault makes resistance evolution structurally difficult. The pathogen would need to simultaneously defeat several distinct chemical attack vectors. 1 to 5 tincture, 3 to 5 mils, 3 times daily. Topically, crush fresh plant directly onto infected wounds. You are now equipped with 5 botanical systems that have outlasted empires, pandemics, and the entire history of synthetic chemistry. This channel delivers this caliber of data, clinical, sourced, applicable, every week. Subscribe and ring the bell. Item 6. Chinese skullcap, Scutellaria bicalensis. The first 5 plants destroyed at the membrane level. Skullcap operates deeper. It disables the escape mechanism that makes resistance possible. Li Shizhen, author of the most comprehensive pharmacological compendium in Chinese history, contracted a terminal purulent lung infection at age 20. He treated himself with a concentrated skullcap root decoction. He survived. He spent the rest of his life cataloging the plant kingdom. The plant's reputation as a lung-clearing powerhouse was established by his own body. Its flavonoids bicaline and woganin simultaneously inhibit bacterial fatty acid synthesis and DNA gyrase, blocking membrane construction and DNA replication in a single biochemical strike. The resistance-breaking mechanism is definitive. Bicaline inhibits MDR efflux pumps, restoring efficacy of pharmaceutical beta-lactams against otherwise resistant strains. The drug stays inside. The bacteria die. Corticosteroids suppress the entire immune response to reduce pulmonary inflammation. Skullcap selectively inhibits NF-kappa release without dismissing the immune system's active clearance. It reduces the fire without removing the firefighters. Protocol: 10 grams dried root in 750 ml water, reduced to 250 ml twice daily.
Item 7. Japanese knotweed, Polygonum cuspidatum. Governments spend hundreds of millions attempting to eradicate it. They are chemically attacking one of the most sophisticated natural antibiotic platforms the plant kingdom has produced. It grows through volcanic rock and asphalt. Samurai used it for traumatic wilderness injuries. Its rhizome is the world's most concentrated natural source of resveratrol and polydatin. Resveratrol is a phytoalexin, a plant-produced antibiotic synthesized specifically in response to bacterial and fungal attack. The same molecular warfare the plant runs on its own pathogens is deployed against yours. Imodin, the anthraquinone, doesn't simply poison bacteria, it renders them blind, blocking the surface protein interactions pathogens use to identify and attach to host tissue. A pathogen that cannot attach, cannot colonize. Critically, Japanese knotweed penetrates the blood-brain barrier and reaches deep connective tissue, where Borrelia spirochetes shelter in late-stage Lyme disease. Almost nothing else on this list gets there. Protocol: 70% ethanol tincture, 5 milliliters 3 times daily for systemic blood or joint infections. Powdered root topically for deep wounds, styptic plus antimicrobial barrier simultaneously.
Item 8. Sweet wormwood, Artemisia annua. This plant won a Nobel Prize.
Most people still can't identify it. The preparation error alone is the difference between medicine and hot water. During the Vietnam War, North Vietnamese soldiers sustained higher casualties from drug-resistant malaria than from combat. The emergency research response excavated a 1600-year-old manuscript by Gay Hung, which described cold extraction, not boiling. That single detail, buried in 340 AD, was what modern researchers had missed. The Nobel Prize followed. Artemisinin contains an endoperoxide bridge, chemically unstable in the presence of iron. Pathogenic organisms accumulate high intracellular iron. When artemisinin contacts that iron, the bridge detonates, a localized free radical burst that shreds the pathogen's internals from the inside, calibrated by the pathogen's own biology to fire only where it's concentrated. Healthy human cells are not triggered. Heat destroys artemisinin. Boiled tea of this plant is dramatically less effective. Protocol: cold macerate dried leaves for minimum 4 hours, or grind to fine powder, 3 grams per dose, no heat. Maintain for 5 to 7 days acute.
Item 9. Woad, Isatis tinctoria. You know it as war paint. That is the smallest fraction of what it is. Celtic tribes painted themselves blue before combat, not for intimidation, but as a prophylactic against wound infection. Pliny the Elder and Hippocrates both documented it clinically. Woad treated malignant ulcers and prevented gangrene. During the 2003 SARS outbreak, Ban Lan Gen, woad root, sold out across the Asian continent before any pharmaceutical product could respond. Its polysaccharides function as molecular decoys, mimicking the surface architecture of respiratory epithelial cells, tricking pathogens into binding to the plant molecule rather than your lung tissue. The pathogen locks onto a decoy and is neutralized before it contacts living tissue. Simultaneously, indirubin dismantles gram-positive bacterial cell walls. Tamiflu is functionally useless against bacterial co-infections, the primary cause of death in major respiratory events. Woad addresses both vectors. 15-gram root decocted daily for acute respiratory fever. Fresh leaves crushed directly onto wounds. The indigo pigment functions as an antifungal and antibacterial surface barrier. Item 10. Christmas bush, Alchornia cordifolia. In the Nigerian kingdom of Ekebedioboro, there is a law: you do not destroy a Christmas bush without just cause. Communities structured their legal code around protecting a plant that was simultaneously treating syphilis, gonorrhea, and tuberculosis. The pharmaceutical industry required 3 separate drug classes to attempt the same coverage and is now losing ground against resistant strains of all 3. The alkaloid choiisopentenyl guanidine specifically targets gram-negative bacteria, the CDC's nightmare pathogens, protected by a double membrane architecture that renders most antibiotics structurally incapable of penetration. Alchornia bypasses this. Gallic and ellagic acid then cleave the proteins bacteria use to maintain cell wall integrity. A third mechanism, hexadecanoic acid, blocks viral entry into CD4 receptors, 3 simultaneous attack vectors. No pharmaceutical antibiotic covers all 3. Protocol: leaf decoction for respiratory, urinary, and GI infections. Chew young leaves for throat or mouth infections, releasing alkaloids directly onto mucosal tissue. Root bark tincture 1 to 5, 2 to 4 milliliters 3 times daily for deep systemic coverage. Item 11. Wireweed, Sida acuta. Reclassified. The dossier lists Sida twice. The reclassification is the point. In Burkina Faso, Arbre à Balai, the broom tree, it's the first-line defense against malaria and infectious diarrhea in populations that have never seen a pharmacy. 500 years of empirical data on what actually works. Wireweed carries cryptolepine from item 2, but pairs it with vasicine, a bronchodilator. You are simultaneously deploying a systemic blood-borne antimicrobial while physically opening the bronchial passages to evacuate the debris of dead bacteria. No pharmaceutical product combines a systemic antibiotic with a bronchodilator in a single compound. This plant does it naturally. The third mechanism, ferulic acid, shields red blood cells from the oxidative damage of Herxheimer reaction toxin load, managing the aftermath of its own antimicrobial action. Levofloxacin causes permanent tendon and nerve damage now classified as fluoroquinolone-associated disability. Wireweed provides systemic coverage with blood protective, not blood destructive effects. Protocol: 1 to 5 tincture of dried leaves. Field use: 1 tablespoon dried herb per tup, simmered 15 minutes, quarter cup doses throughout the day. Item 12.
Carry-me seed, Phyllanthus amaris. Every item on this list kills pathogens. This one protects the organs you need to survive the kill. Known in the Amazon as chancapiedra, stonebreaker, for eliminating kidney and gallstones, a function urological research has confirmed. The critical survival function is what it does during a die-off event. It enhances the liver's efflux transport system, dramatically accelerating clearance of bacterial endotoxins from circulation during a Herxheimer reaction. Without functional liver filtration during mass bacterial die-off, the toxin release becomes its own crisis. Phyllanthus keeps the filtration system operational when it's most under threat. Modern antivirals are narrow, expensive, and frequently hepatotoxic. They damage the organ they need to process them. Phyllanthus achieves the inversion, hepatoprotection concurrent with pathogen clearance. It also relaxes urinary tract musculature, reducing spasmodic UTI pain while facilitating renal waste clearance. Protocol: 3 to 4 cups whole plant infusion daily for kidney and liver infections. In multi-botanical protocols, this is the plant that keeps your elimination organs viable enough to survive the others.
Item 13. African locust bean, Parkia biglobosa. This is the one teased in the opening. Pay attention to the mechanism. It represents a philosophy of infection management the pharmaceutical industry has never developed. During fermentation of locust bean seeds, beneficial bacillus species produce antimicrobial peptides specifically lethal to Staphylococcus aureus and Salmonella at concentrations that don't harm host tissue. These peptides are not present in the raw seed. Fermentation manufactures them. The traditional food preparation process was, without any laboratory infrastructure, conducting a controlled bioactive synthesis. Modern pharmaceutical antibiotics operate on a scorched earth policy. Broad-spectrum agents eliminate pathogens and simultaneously destroy the commensal microbiome governing gut barrier integrity, immune function, and neurotransmitter synthesis. The resulting dysbiosis is linked to autoimmune pathology that outlasts the original infection by months or years. Fermented locust bean inverts this entirely. The peptides target specific pathogens, while the fermentation environment simultaneously provides beneficial bacillus populations the substrate to flourish. You are killing the pathogen and rebuilding the ecological system it attacked, simultaneously. Protocol: fermented dawa dawa as dietary staple for prophylactic gut protection, bark decoction as wound wash for acute staph infections, leaf steam inhalation for respiratory involvement. Item 14. St. John's wort, Hypericum perforatum. The pharmaceutical industry knows this plant as a mood modulator. The Knights Hospitaller knew it as a battlefield antibiotic capable of preventing tetanus and gangrene. The gap between those descriptions is the gap between marketing and medicine. The Knights deployed macerated flower oil, the red oil, against deep sword and arrow wounds. Their field hospital system was built on outcomes. This plant survived their selection process. Hyperforin disrupts the bacterial membrane's electrochemical gradient. When the gradient collapses, the bacterial cell's internal pH drops catastrophically. The bacteria acidify and die rapidly. Unique on this list, hyperforin crosses the blood-brain barrier. Most antibiotics, pharmaceutical or botanical, cannot reach the CNS in therapeutically relevant concentrations. Infections reaching nervous tissue, bacterial meningitis, neuroborreliosis, become dramatically more dangerous precisely because pharmacological tools are structurally excluded from that tissue. Hyperforin gets there. Protocol: macerate fresh flowers in carrier oil for 6 weeks in direct sunlight until deep crimson. Apply to wounds, burns, and infected skin. For systemic viral infections, 1 to 5 tincture of fresh flowers. Note photosensitivity risk at high internal doses. Manageable. Gangrene is not.
Item 15. Licorice, Glycyrrhiza glabra. Every other item functions as a weapon. This one is a force multiplier. Without it, you are leaving a significant percentage of your botanical pharmacopoeia's potential unrealized. Ancient formulators called it the grand mediator, not because it was the most powerful curative agent, but because it amplified the function of everything used alongside it. They observed this outcome consistently across thousands of patients and thousands of years without knowing the mechanism. The mechanism is glycyrrhizin's inhibition of P-glycoprotein, the transmembrane efflux transporter that pumps foreign substances back out of the body before they reach effective concentrations. This is the mechanism that prevents many medicinal compounds from reaching therapeutically relevant plasma levels. Glycyrrhizin disables that pump. Add 15% licorice root to any botanical decoction, and the other antimicrobial compounds circulate longer, reach higher concentrations, penetrate tissues more deeply. It simultaneously masks the extreme bitterness of compounds like andrographis and provides cortisol-mimicking adrenal support during the prolonged physiological stress of systemic infection. Protocol: 15% licorice added to every decoction on this list. For direct mucosal application, chew raw root directly onto affected throat or gastric tissue. Item 16. Black cumin, Nigella sativa. It was found in Tutankhamun's tomb, placed there deliberately, considered essential enough to accompany a pharaoh into the afterlife. Thymoquinone, the active benzoquinone released when seeds are crushed, operates through 3 simultaneous mechanisms: biofilm inhibition against Staphylococcus and Pseudomonas, apoptosis-like metabolic cascade collapse inside the bacterial cell, and histamine stabilization, preventing cytokine storm and anaphylaxis, the inflammatory overreaction that constitutes the actual killing mechanism in severe systemic infections, not the pathogen itself. That third function separates this item from the previous 15. Every prior plant targets the pathogen. Black cumin simultaneously manages the host's potentially fatal overreaction to infection. The cytokine storm that killed most 1918 influenza victims was not caused by the virus. It was the immune system's uncontrolled response. A compound that kills the pathogen and prevents the fatal inflammatory cascade simultaneously is not just an antibiotic, it is a survival system. Seeds must be crushed. Whole seeds pass through with dramatically reduced bioavailability. 1 teaspoon freshly crushed seeds in raw honey daily prophylactically. Acute infection, cold-pressed black seed oil, 1 teaspoon twice daily. Item 17. Mongolian milk vetch, Astragalus membranaceus. Every prior item is a weapon against active infection. This one determines whether infection takes hold at all. Chinese emperors were given huangqi specifically as a prophylactic before required public appearances during epidemic events. Their physicians understood the most powerful intervention is immunological preparation before exposure, not pharmaceutical response after colonization. Astragalicides upregulate interleukin-2 and interferon gamma, the cytokine signals that mobilize T cells and natural killer cells, the immune system's primary offensive cellular units. Unlike synthetic immune stimulants that indiscriminately amplify inflammatory signaling, astragalus is an adaptogen. It elevates immune activity when the system is underperforming and moderates it when overactivation is producing collateral damage. It calibrates rather than simply escalates. Immune booster supplements at the pharmacy provide substrate support. Astragalus is classified as a biological response modifier. It changes the fundamental operating parameters of the immune system itself. This is infrastructure, not acute treatment. Sliced root in every soup or stew, sustained baseline. During known outbreak events, 30-gram root in concentrated daily decoction. Begin before the crisis arrives.
Item 18. Echinacea. Echinacea species. It's sold everywhere as a gentle cold remedy. That commercial framing has buried its actual clinical history completely. The Lakota and Cheyenne used it for rattlesnake bites, septicemia, and chronic infected ulcers that had resisted every other available treatment. Before synthetic pharmaceutical production, it was the most widely prescribed botanical agent by practicing American physicians, not folk healers. The pharmaceutical era didn't replace it with something superior. It replaced it with something patentable. Its alkylamides bind directly to CB2 receptors on immune cells, triggering a massive release of phagocytes, the cellular hunters that physically engulf and destroy bacteria. Simultaneously, it inhibits hyaluronidase, the molecular crowbar from item 1, physically locking the infection's territorial perimeter in place, while the phagocytic response clears a contained, non-expanding infection at maximum output. Modern cold medications suppress fever and inflammatory pain, suppressing the immune response while leaving the pathogen undisturbed. Echinacea amplifies the response. It is also evolution-proof. Bacteria cannot mutate a defense against being eaten. The tingle on the tongue confirms active alkylamide content. No tingle, clinically inert. Discarded. Acute sepsis protocol. 5 ml fresh root tincture in high-proof alcohol every hour during the first 24 hours.
Item 19. Rock rose, Cistus incanus. The other 18 items are killers. This one is a net. In continuous use on Crete since the Minoan civilization, one of Europe's earliest complex societies, for every pestilence of the air. Its polymeric proanthocyanidins and myricetin physically wrap around pathogen surface architecture, encasing viruses and bacteria in a polyphenol matrix that sterically blocks surface proteins from contacting host cell receptors. The pathogen is present, it is alive, it cannot attach to anything. It is molecularly neutralized by physical occlusion, not chemical destruction. This is why rock rose is categorically nonspecific. Every other antimicrobial on this list targets specific molecular pathways that theoretically permit resistant mutations. A physical steric barrier, a molecular net cast around the entire pathogen surface, has no resistance profile. The pathogen cannot mutate its shape to escape a molecular enclosure. It works against virtually all enveloped viruses and a broad range of bacterial species simultaneously, regardless of pharmaceutical resistance status. Steep 2 teaspoons dried leaves in hot water for a full 10 minutes, not a brief dip. 3 cups daily to maintain circulating polyphenol concentration. As a topical wash, direct polyphenol barrier coverage for candida skin infections and trenchfoot conditions.
Item 20. Garlic, Allium sativum. Pyramid workers stopped working. They refused. They went on strike, one of the earliest documented labor actions in recorded human history. And their single demand was not wages, not rest, not reduced quotas. They demanded the return of their garlic ration. The garlic was restored. The work resumed. 3,500 years later, the Red Army was running out of pharmaceutical antibiotics on the Eastern Front. The solution was not synthetic. Field medics deployed garlic so extensively and so successfully against battlefield wound infections that it acquired a military designation, Russian penicillin. 5,000 years of continuous deployment across the most extreme disease pressure environments in human history. No other plant on this list carries that record. The raw intact clove contains no allicin. It contains 2 compounds held in separate cellular compartments, alliin and alliinase. They do not contact each other while the cell is intact. Crush or slice the clove and the enzymatic reaction produces allicin, reaching peak concentration at exactly 10 minutes after crushing. Allicin penetrates bacterial cell walls without a transport mechanism and chemically disables the thiol-containing enzymes bacteria use to produce energy, synthesize proteins, and replicate DNA, simultaneously. Not one enzyme, the shared sulfur-based infrastructure across multiple essential bacterial systems. Energy production collapses, protein synthesis halts, replication stalls. A 1% dilution of raw garlic juice delivers the same antibacterial power as many laboratory-grade chemical disinfectants. Modern antibiotics like amoxicillin are bacteriostatic. They stop growth and rely on the immune system to finish the clearance. Allicin is bactericidal. It does not slow, it terminates. Bacteria cannot easily evolve resistance because the enzymatic targets are too fundamental to bacterial metabolism to be modified without destroying the organism's own viability. The resistance pathway is self-defeating. Every pharmaceutical antibiotic on the global AMR crisis list is losing ground. Garlic has been deployed against bacteria for 5 millennia. The bacteria have not won. The preparation rule is non-negotiable. Heat destroys allicin. Cooked garlic contains no functional allicin. You are eating flavor. You are not deploying medicine. Crush, wait 10 minutes, do not add heat. Protocol: 3 to 5 raw cloves daily, sliced and swallowed whole like tablets. For field wounds, freshly crushed raw garlic applied directly to the wound surface. The pyramid workers were not superstitious. The Red Army medics were not practicing folk medicine. They were solving a pharmaceutical supply chain crisis with the most effective antimicrobial available. Both of them were right.
You now have 20 botanical systems, history, mechanism, and protocol for each. None requires a prescription. None is behind a paywall. All sourced from peer-reviewed research. If this video gave you something the mainstream health conversation never has, subscribe and ring the bell right now. Every week, this channel delivers this caliber of clinical, sourced, survival-relevant data. The next video you miss could be the one you needed most.